Welcome back to Timeless Mindset. In this episode, we are joined by Jess Williamson. She's an author, mindset and business coach, speaker, entrepreneur, and podcaster. Jess is ambitious, and from an early age, she knew a typical life wouldn't fulfill her. And like a lot of us, we want more than just a 9-to-5 job and getting by. So how do we do it? What is the secret to overcoming these barriers? How do I know what I truly want and then chase after it? Jess is an award-winning coach and business owner. We tackle these issues using her experience and wisdom gained over the last 10 years. Expect to learn about how to overcome your limiting beliefs, why you need to figure out your values, how to conceptualise your comfort zone for growth, the secrets to dreaming big and chasing your goals, how to avoid burnout whilst working hard, why self-sabotage does not exist, why the story you tell yourself is so important, plus so much more. A big thank you to Jess. I thoroughly enjoyed her perspectives in this episode, and I hope you gained something from it. I definitely did. Let's go. Before we begin, are you in Perth and love looking after your physical and mental health? We all deserve to give our body the love it needs. Look no further than Perth's newest and best recovery centre, Rec Lab. It's located in Wembley and has everything you need. 2 huge ice bath plunge pools, a 39-degree magnesium hot pool, a steam room, traditional sauna and hyperbaric chamber. And more importantly, the owner, Pete, is an amazing individual and the people who go there are incredible. It's a great community, an incredible facility, and it's just such a great space to give your body the love it needs. The link to his website and Instagram is located in the show notes below. Make sure to mention myself, Egan, when you visit, and I'll make sure he looks after you. Let's get into it.
Everyone is going through something.
I think that you can actually do anything you set your mind to.
If someone were to ask you who you are and what you stand for, you should be able to answer that question.
You got to be grateful for where you're at.
I don't really want to have all these cuddles. This is your role. Step up.
Jess Williamson, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's such a refreshing change being here in Perth to record.
Where have you been recently?
Oh, I've been to the Gold Coast. Honestly, I probably might as well move there at this point, but I was over there speaking at a pretty big epic event over there, and I've been back and forth doing some podcasts and all sorts of fun stuff.
So you've travelled quite a bit around the world. How does Perth compare to the rest of the world? I'm about to head to Europe for a month.
Oh, fun.
So how does Perth compare to the rest of the world?
Yeah, Perth. There's nowhere like it. It's lovely sleepy town. I always say to people, Perth people either go to the beach or they're at home. They're not really anywhere else. And that's kind of my life when I come back to Perth. It's like this retreat where I can just chill out at home, be with family and go to the beach. That's literally all I do. So it's good. Have
you been to America?
Yes.
I've heard they're quite open, the American dream, they're quite big-minded. Whereas I feel like Perth, it's there's sort of that tall poppy syndrome, but there's the beauty and the simplicities. When you go to America, they're very more expansive with their dream.
Yeah, for sure. I actually went on exchange to America when I was in uni. Yeah. It was like living in a movie, but it was a wild experience. But yeah, Americans are definitely very much get up and go. It's a lot more competitive and there's definitely no tall poppy. They're here the heck I am. Yeah. Whereas particularly Perth, I even find when you go to the Gold Coast or Sydney or Melbourne, there's a bit more of that competitive spirit. Whereas Perth, it's kind of so insulated that a lot of people only think as big as Perth in a lot of business owners that I've chatted with.
Do you think it's important that people, especially who feel stuck, get out of their physical environment? I feel like that can spark a change.
Yeah, physical environment is everything. Even when I'm at home and I'm sitting at my desk, I can't do creative work at my desk. It's anchored into very doing and logical. So I'll go outside and just get some new inspiration. But travel's always been the biggest expander for me. Whenever I go to Europe, I come back and I'm let's go. I've got all the ideas. And so, yeah, it's the best thing, just getting out of your physical environment. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully Europe gives me some inspiration.
Yeah.
There's even heaps of studies that show even bigger ceilings spark more creativity within your house. So it's, I feel like you get confined, you work in a really tight room and you can feel sort of stuck.
Yeah. when I started my first business, I used to have like one of those TV dinner tables that was like the size of my desk, and it was like beside my bed at home where I lived with my parents, and like that was it. So I'd wake up and then sit at that all day and then go back to bed, and it was pretty damn confined.
You've been building this reputation for quite a few years now with your business, with all the things you do. Do you ever feel the pressure? Like, because with a reputation comes an expectation. You go into new rooms, you're speaking on a podcast, you go to these events. People, whether they're buying from you or listening to you, they sort of expect something. And I know for a lot of your journey, it was about overcoming those limiting beliefs. But I feel like it's different when you have nothing to lose from when now you do have something to lose almost.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I started my journey, I was like, I don't want anyone to know I exist. Let me just not put my name even on the About Me page. And I just wanted to fly under the radar. And then I started building a personal brand, and I was like, cool, messy action. Let me just start showing up, overcoming those beliefs. And then when I started to become more known, I was on TV and I was in the press and I was doing all of these things. I started to realize that I was filtering myself more, because then I was consciously aware of what people expected me to show up as. And I didn't feel as comfortable just showing up as my messy self. I started sharing less personality and not being as fun and just sharing my daily life. And I was like, oh, it has to be value-based, or it has to be curated in a certain way. And I wasn't consciously thinking it, where I was like, okay, let me curate my life. But it was just like this subconscious thing of being careful of what I was putting out. So I've started to be more conscious on the other side, to be like, cool, let me just show you the messy action. Let me share more behind the scenes again. But it's like this seesaw of just balance.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with that, because I feel like when I started a podcast, I sort of pigeonholed myself into that mindset guy who was always serious. And I was creating this almost persona of who I was, and I subconsciously was trying to uphold it. But I feel like what I learned is it's because I was evolving so much, and I was scared of almost going back to where I was. And I think at the core of it, you don't have enough confidence in yourself. So you're almost scared of it still comes back to fear of judgment, I believe.
Yeah. And I think for me, the biggest thing has always been, because I'm so quiet and introverted, when I'm in groups or networking situations, or, you go to an event and you're speaking to people beforehand, people they don't recognize that I'm a speaker, because they're like, this chick is so quiet and introverted. How could she be the person who's going to get up on stage? And secondly, I just like to observe. But then when people see you online and on stages, and then they expect you to be this super loud person, but it's like the part of me that I can switch on, it's like a new different mode when I get onto stage or things like that. And it's not a fake part of me, but I used to also feel awkward about that. I was like, what do you mean? Who am I? Like, people would be like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm the headlining speaker for the show. And so I used to feel like in this internal battle of, do I need to go and be more loud and mingle more and make sure people know my presence? But then I realized there's power in that, in just flying under the radar and not feeling like I have to be on all the time.
So how did you learn to relinquish this pressure to be the same person for different things? Like, how did you learn to just let go of that expectation?
I think a lot of the pressure that I was putting on myself was, how do I want others to perceive me? And that was where I was having this internal battle versus, what if I just know that I'm the badass entrepreneur that I am? And if people want to be like, who's this chick? How could she possibly get up on the stage? Or, how could she be successful because she's so quiet? And knowing that actually, if people want to think that, that's my superpower, because then they'll never see me coming. And then I get out there and crush it on the stage. So it's really about just grounding back into, like, I am quiet in bigger situations, in group settings. I am an introvert, and that's my superpower. So when we can own the parts of us that we're worried about other people seeing, it takes away all of the power, and we can feel super comfortable in being seen in that way.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel like I'm quite introverted by nature.
Yeah.
But then when I'm with people one-on-one, like or in small group settings, like I love talking, expressing myself. But once the circle gets too big, I'm more of an observer. But then because I do so much online content and I've put myself out there, I've told myself this story that now I need to show up that way.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of thing I'm still learning to embrace, is like, you know what, I can be whatever I need to be. There are no set rules. I don't need to show up in any set way.
Yeah, for sure.
Talk to me about starting, because I've heard you started your own business at 7 when you started school. But to me, that speaks to you've always had this passion to do it, because for me, I started YouTube when I was 10 years old, but then I didn't do it for another 11 years. I didn't start a podcast. So it's almost like this thing, is it like, were we always meant to do this? Did we have was this who we always were? So take us back to starting the girls club.
Yeah. So I think we all are somewhat born with our own strengths and weaknesses. And it's just like throughout our journey, we either got taught that it's not okay to be that way, or that that's not what society wants us to do. So then we kind of tone it down. But I feel like when we hit this kind of age, we're like, that thing was always my superpower. So it's awesome that you've come back to your content. But for me, when I was 7, I started the girls club because I've always been a bit of a problem solver. So I noticed that the kids were just playing like aimlessly at recess. You know, the bell rings, you go out, you eat your lunch and you just play whatever. But I was like, we can do this better. So how about I organize like party games, you know, like you would do at a kid's party. Let me organize these games. It'll be like a scavenger hunt or a certain type of game where there's a winner, and the winner would get a bag of lollies from the canteen. So I was like, cool, let me sign up some members. Let me get some people on this girls club. And so everyone paid their 20 cents, and then I used that 20 cents or the pool to buy the lollies for the prize. But very quickly, the teachers found out, so it probably lasted about 2 days, and they made me give all the money back, which I didn't really have at that point because I'd spent it on the lollies. And so, yeah, they made me give everyone's money back and basically made me feel like I was a scammer. Like, you're not allowed to take money from kids at school. But it's like they were willing customers that wanted to invest in something fun, and I was delivering a service. So it was like ingrained in me from back then, which unfortunately at 7, I didn't have the confidence to be like, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway. So I kind of got taught that it's bad. So then I didn't really do any other businesses for a long time. Not that I knew it was a business back then. I was just like, A equals B, and that's how we're going to do it. And it just made sense to me. But it's interesting how these things play out when you're a kid, but then authority figures tell you no, or it's bad. And so then you just stop and you don't do it.
What I think is interesting is when you're in primary school, in that really critical period when you grow up, when you go into post-high school, you actually succeed by doing the things you were conditioned not to do.
Yeah.
So think for yourself, to go out of the box, to question authority. Those things are almost prerequisites for success nowadays.
Yeah.
But back then, you get told off for doing that. So it's really like, it's hard. I think that's why a lot of people conform to the norm and put themselves in these boxes. But can you source back where this sort of out of the box thinking and Fantasyland dreams come from?
This is a good question, because I always get asked, like, how did you just have that self-belief? And I truly believe I was just somehow born with it, because there was no real moment, or there was no real evidence, or there was nothing really that was like, oh, that's why I created that belief. I've always had very supportive parents and family around me, but I've just always been a big dreamer. Like, why not? Why can't we do what we want to do? And it's always other people's limiting beliefs that get projected onto us, unfortunately.
So how do we overcome it?
Oh, okay. So this was really interesting. So when I started to build my business when I was 22, not at 7, but when I started to build that and network and talk to other entrepreneurs, I had the massive light bulb moment that not everyone thought the same as me. I just thought everyone, like, you have an idea, you go and do it, and magically you have success. Like, let's just create this. And so then I started to unpack, why do I think this way, or how do I think this way? And then I got really intrigued and obsessed with learning how the mind works, the subconscious mind, and the purpose of it, and how it keeps us safe, and limiting beliefs, and all of this incredible stuff. So there is no short answer in terms of how do we stop thinking that, because I believe that we need to actually diagnose first, and everyone's diagnosis is going to be different. So what I mean about that is, we might have a limiting belief around, let's say, I don't know if this will work out. But someone's exact narrative or story behind that is always going to be different, based on their values, how they've been brought up, what experiences they've had throughout their life, where they've been pulling in all the evidence that they should be fearful of that. So I like to always work with my clients on getting to the root cause of, why do you think that way? And then once we have the awareness, we can move forward. Because a lot of people just say, oh, get more organized, or get more disciplined, or write a better to-do list. But it's like, if there's a hardwired narrative playing out that says, like, you're basically going to die if you go ahead with this, then there's no pushing that's going to ever let us get past the procrastination or the self-sabotage.
I feel like most of society is caught up in treating the symptoms and not the cause. Because I believe a lot of people are also very time pressed because of how society's set up. You know, there is a lot of financial pressure. So it's like there's almost not enough time or quote unquote space to start thinking for yourself. And you've spent the last 15 years not being able to think for yourself. You've been told how to solve maths problems. I remember I had a real passion for maths, and I used to solve it differently.
Yeah.
And I got almost told off for that. And I started to actually doubt my own way of thinking. And it was at that moment I was like, maybe I don't have the answers. And one of the most powerful lessons I've learned is that no one has it figured out. And I'm interested in your learnings from this, because you've met mega successful people, and so many podcasts I listen to, they're constantly reminding me like that they don't have it figured out. No one has it figured out. So we can get lost looking for answers from people playing different games to ours.
Yeah. So what's the question?
Speak to the learnings of meeting these successful people who we look to for the answers, but often they don't have it figured out, and they're playing a different game to us because they're a different human being.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's always forever figuring it out. And if anyone ever believes they have it all figured out, then they're really capping their own success, because it closes their mind off to learning anything else. And I think there is power in looking to people who maybe have walked the path before us, or have created a level of success that we don't have yet, because success leaves clues. But at the same time, I don't think I've ever taken anyone's specific advice word for word and done it exactly their way, because everyone has their own definition of success. Everyone has their own strengths. Everyone has their own way of figuring it out, like your maths problem. And so I always say, look to leaders for what you can take from them, and then leave the rest. You don't have to take everything, but I think the key really is trial and error yourself. Like, until you've lived it, until you've really embodied it, just listening to info or learning from someone else doesn't mean you have knowledge. It means you have information.
How important is taking action? I feel like the biggest power in self-development and this wisdom comes from the doing. I often use a lot of self-experiments. Like, I go through these little mini life experiments where I try out different mindsets or practices or ways of thinking, which give me the lived experience to actually learn the lesson and gain the insight.
Yeah, I love that. Sorry, what was the question?
Well, it's not really a question. It's more just there's so much information right now in modern society, and I think we can get really lost in that. Everyone's telling you how to think, what to do. I think we don't spend enough time actually thinking and introspecting. It's interesting to note because, like, as much as there's people telling you to follow the traditional path, I think there's just as much people now telling you to chase your dreams, and there's so much information everywhere. I still think there's too much looking to the external.
Yeah.
I still think there's the people who really get into the spiritual stuff and introspect and start to look to their values, look to what brings them fulfillment. I think that creates the best shortcut to success.
Oh, for sure.
Because I think the reason what happens is people, they have this calling for more. So they start to follow and take advice from people who aren't following traditional careers. And then they start to take action. But you can almost shortcut that by looking within, reflecting on your experiences, because I feel like an evolution of a journey that I've gone on is you follow the people who you want to become like we said, we look to the leaders, we look at their success, it leaves clues. But the most fulfillment I've found is from actually those hard conversations with myself, because I still reckon in some way we're trying to escape it by like looking to someone for a wholesale answer.
Yeah, I think too many people are trying to look for the right answer. And it's like there is no right answer or no right way of doing things. Even when I started my swimwear brand, I had zero experience in fashion, in manufacturing, in business, had no freaking clue. And the question I always get asked is like, so then how did you make a swimwear brand? Like, of course you must have had a fashion background. And my brain just says, well, I did it my way. And I said, okay, I need to communicate to a manufacturer how I want this made. What is the most streamlined way that I can think of? And for me, it was like putting in a spreadsheet with the front, the back, diagrams, measurements. And so I never did the proper CAD drawings or all the proper way of doing it. But it was actually more efficient. And even when I learnt the proper way, I still did it my way because it was easier, faster, and it communicated the message. So I think sometimes we can look at, okay, how is it done? Is there an easier, quicker way? But also, how do I want to do it? If we have to communicate in a certain way, great. What's the most streamlined way? If we have a goal, then what is the most direct route to get there? Not what is the right route or what is the route that someone else took. But if you want to launch a book, well, we don't need to research all damn day to figure out how to do it. You just start, and then before you know it, you've done the thing that you set out to do. So I do think action, I've always been someone who like sprints towards everything. I'll fall down a few times, I'll get back up and I'll keep running, because at least even in those times that I fall down, I've learned what I don't want to do. And then I can do it more my way. So I think there's just a balance of seeking the information and then doing what you want to do anyway and trialing it out.
No one would disagree that consistency is the key. But when you start following other people's versions of success, there becomes this slow drift over time away from your authenticity, which I think prevents you from being consistent, because in the long run, burnout is inevitable when you're not being yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I was chasing society's idea of success. In like 2019, I had 5 businesses because I was like, okay, there's an opportunity. I can do that. There's a business that looks fun. I can do all of these things, but it didn't really mean I should do them. And I think sometimes people see consistency as just keep going in the direction that I'm already going. But sometimes it means pivoting and being consistent to who you are and what you want out of it. So at that point, I actually had to pause when I'd hit max burnout. And I said, well, what does success mean to me? Because I think I'm a bit off track at this point. I was super burnt out, adrenal fatigue, anxious every day, and I could then realign. So I think consistency is great, but not consistency to the extent of I could have kept going in all of those businesses and continued to burn myself out and get even further from that idea. But consistency in let's keep moving, but like let's continue to check in, evaluate, pivot, and adapt the whole way as well.
What have you found is the best way to figure out who you are? Like, I feel like when we're younger, we have this authenticity, and then slowly over time we put these masks on to fit in with society. But how do you find, you've worked with a lot of people, what are some of the secrets to uncovering that authenticity?
Yeah. Look, lots of inner reflection and lots of getting out of your comfort zone. I truly believe that is one of the biggest pieces, because we can meditate and journal all day and self-reflect in isolation, but there's only so much that we can see within ourselves. Like, we obviously have our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. A lot of that wisdom is in our subconscious, and our conscious mind has all these walls up that don't even allow ourselves to witness ourselves, whether it's in our shadows, whether it's in our superpowers. And so self-reflection is great, but getting out of your comfort zone, messing shit up, falling over face first, that's when I've learnt the most about myself, when I've hit the rock bottom moments and I was able to rebuild who I want to be, who I know I am, what I'm good at. But then another huge part of learning who I am has been through having incredible mentors on my journey. And while we've got friends and family that will be our biggest cheerleaders, they'll support us sometimes, having like a third party, like a mentor who doesn't really have a personal connection in that sense, where they can call you out on your shit, where they can say like, actually, you're self-sabotaging and let's dig a bit deeper, or even just to reflect things back like, wow, that's one of your superpowers. I've witnessed this in you the whole time. That's actually where I've got most of my golden nuggets from, because there's only so much we can see within ourselves, because we've created this perception of self within us, like this identity. And so honestly, that's where a lot of my knowledge around what my superpowers are has been just from those candid reflections from mentors.
Yeah, there's a lot on the internet about monk mode, right? Like where these extended periods of isolation, of introspection. But I think true understanding of who you are, right, comes from actually being in the arena. And I still think that takes so much courage. Like, I think a lot of people, like, we fall into the trap. I definitely know I fall into the trap of like saying how much I'm going to do, fantasizing about all these dreams I'm going to chase. But then it's like, well, how do my actions actually align to this?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to drift into that comfort. But then what do you think we're trying to optimize for? Like, we're doing all this self-work, this self-development, but where do you think the end goal is actually for all of this? Like, there's financial freedom, there's, you know, reaching your goals, reaching your potential. Do you have a conscious idea of what you're optimizing for?
Yeah, for me, it is the financial, because financial gives us choice, right? It gives us the ability to, if a family member has a health challenge, then we can, you know, money gives us options, right? But also for me, it's freedom. And when I figured out what my biggest values were, which was growth and freedom, I could then start to optimize my business model, my life, my time towards those things. So money does give me freedom. It allows me to travel the world and explore and have that sense of adventure. And then what I started to notice was, though, when I was back home in Perth, I would start to feel a bit flat, or like something was missing. And so I was almost seeking the travel for this sense of adventure. And it's when I noticed that I could start to infuse that feeling of adventure. Like, sometimes I'll just get in my car and be like, cool, this is my feel good Friday. Let me just drive around. I don't know where I'm going to go. It's just going to be super spontaneous, solo adventure by myself. And that just reinvigorates me. So I think one of the things when it comes to chasing success is figuring out what your biggest values are, and making sure that whether it's in business, life, partners, that you still have that sense of whatever your biggest value is. But mine is adventure and growth.
Do limiting beliefs obstruct our ability to see our values? So what I mean by that is, is there this innate sense of values that we have, and do the limiting beliefs, the negative stories we tell about ourselves, does that prevent us from being able to introspect, and hence the power of having coaches to see through that?
Yeah, definitely. So I recently ran a retreat in Greece and it was incredible, but I was doing some of this work with some of the girls on the retreat, and one of the girls was going through her values, and she's a mum, and she almost felt this guilt that family was not one of her top values as a mum. And she was like, actually, one of my top values is being able to go to Greece by myself without my family and like living my best life. But because there was this internal dialogue of almost society saying, that's wrong, you should choose your family, she then had this sense of guilt around it. And so once we started to work through that a lot more, she realized that that was not only one of her top values, is having adventure, having spontaneity, having choice for herself, but it was one of her biggest superpowers as well. And so it's oftentimes the limiting beliefs that almost tell us it's wrong to have those values. But if we can really tap into, if no one else was involved, if no one else was going to be impacted, like what would make my life the most amazing? And those are usually our core values, but sometimes it can be hard to see them.
Do you find on the flip side of a lot of people's limiting beliefs is this really innate calling, so that their superpower is on the flip side of their biggest fears, because deep down that's what they want, hence they're very scared to show that to the world, so it becomes this limiting belief?
Yeah, for sure. That was me on my journey. Like one of my biggest fears was being seen as arrogant if I was to brag about my success or talk about it. And the more I did the inner work around owning the part of me that could be seen as arrogant, if I'm like, hey, I just made 100K, or like, I'm so proud of myself, particularly in Australia, we don't love to hear people's success. But when I did more inner work around that, I was like, owning your obnoxious success is my superpower, but I was so afraid of other people seeing that in me that it became like a shadow. It became this part of me that I would hide away or tone down. And now I literally just did my TEDx talk about owning your obnoxious success. So it's usually those pieces that we're most afraid of people seeing that are actually our truest calling. And the reason why we're afraid of people seeing it is because if people reject us when we show up as our fullest self, then they truly are rejecting us. Whereas if we show up with this kind of mask or veil and they reject us, it doesn't hurt as much, because it's like, well, that wasn't my truest self anyway. So it's like this whole self-protection mechanism that we don't actually want people to see us in our truest form, because that shit hurts.
That's very interesting. Like, there was a quote that I like saying to do with like our greatest desire is to be seen in our fullest, but our greatest fear is to be seen in our fullest. So it's like the thing we want the most, it's like the obstacle is the way almost. How do you, the special thing about humans, and you can do all this introspection, but like we spoke before, other human beings are mirrors.
Yeah.
What have been some of your biggest lessons about helping people navigate the discomfort of going through change, showing up as a different person? Because as you said, your success holds up a mirror to other people. What have been some of the big learnings there?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning that I worked through with myself, with a lot of my clients, is taking that part of you that you're afraid of people seeing and just like accepting and loving and owning it. Because when you own, whether it's your shit, whether it's your superpowers, whether it's your bad traits, your weaknesses, your strengths, when you own your shit, no one else can reflect it back to you, because it's like, I'm aware of it and I love that. So thank you for calling me arrogant, or thank you for seeing that in me. And if other people want to be triggered by that part of us, then amazing, that's a gift for them to look into it themselves. But if we truly own our shit, then no one can ever kind of use that as a weapon. And we're no longer afraid of people reflecting it back to us, because like, I love that part of me. So thank you so much for seeing that.
How do we own our shit?
Oh, how do we own our shit? Oh, a lot of discomfort. a lot of discomfort. If you're not getting uncomfortable, then I always say you're not really playing big enough, or you're not getting out of your comfort zone. But sitting through that discomfort is where we actually build our resilience. And so a lot of people go into this discomfort zone and then they're like, oh shit, that's hard. And they step back. Whether that's, increasing your prices in business and no one wants to pay you anymore and apparently now you're too expensive, and then people put their prices back down. Or whether that is saying, you know what, I'm going to be this YouTube superstar, and then we post a few videos and we don't get famous yet, and then we go back into the comfort zone because it's hard and we have to push through and we have to put energy into something that's not working yet. So I always say sit in that discomfort zone and keep pushing as if it was working out to your wildest dreams, because if we can push through that, guess how much easier it's going to be when shit is going well. And through that period, we actually build the discipline, the resilience, the power to be able to show up when shit does hit the fan in future. But if we never get out of our comfort zone, we can never build that strength to be able to show up.
One of my biggest lessons so far in this podcasting journey is success comes in ways you can't imagine, right? When do we know the right time to pivot or to grit our teeth and push our way through that discomfort?
Yeah. So I always say there's two choices with every challenge that we face. One, push through it, keep going. Where there's a will, there's always a way. It just depends how willing we are to do it. And most people aren't willing. That's the thing. The option 2 is to go back into that comfort zone, to give up, to let go of the goal, to let go of the dream. And neither is wrong or right. A lot of times people look at giving up as the wrong thing, or it's like, oh, it's so embarrassing, I failed. But it's like, actually, you just made a choice. And some people's biggest values is safety and security. And it's like, if your biggest value is safety and security, then stepping back into that comfort zone is not a bad thing. But I'm going to guess everyone listening to this right now is probably more in the ambitious category, loves growth, loves challenge, loves getting out of that comfort zone. And so what I always come back to is people are worried, will it work out or will it not work out? It will always work out. It won't always be easy. And so it's just really asking yourself, do I really want this? If the answer is yes, then the second question is asking yourself, what am I willing to endure to make this happen? And if we're willing, we can make anything happen.
For me, I've done, this might be episode 121, but that's a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
And it hasn't met, my expectations when I started. But a lot of things have come from that, like not only a job opportunity next year, the people I've met, the person I'm becoming along the way. But when you're an ambitious individual, I know for me, whenever I don't reach my expectations, I use that as ammunition against myself. And increasingly, I'm becoming aware how important the self-story is along this journey. So talk to me about the self-story, because the words that you talk to yourself are so important. And like you said, is there a right choice? Often there isn't. We have to make the choice right. But how can we use the self-story in our journeys?
Yeah, I think the self-story is powerful because our mind doesn't know the difference between like a story, a narrative, a belief, and reality. So I always stop and ask myself, is this a fact or is it a story that I've made up and chosen to believe? Usually it's a story, right? It's a story that it's not good enough yet or it's not hitting the marks. But if it's a fact and it's like you've got a goal of a certain number and it's like we can see numbers and it's not quite hitting it yet, then we can say, okay, maybe it's a fact, and then we can get strategic about it. But while we focus on the story, we're just going through all the emotions, all the narratives, all the self-belief. We usually spiral and it gives us a pretty damn good excuse to let go of what we really want. But if we can focus on the facts, okay, maybe it hasn't grown as fast as we'd like. Then what we can look at is, what can I do to push it a little bit harder? What can I do to learn where my gaps are? Do I need someone who's been there and grown a successful podcast to come in and be like, cool, this is what you're missing. And the information, the people, the support, the strategies, they're all out there. Just usually we don't know what we don't know. So I think the most powerful thing is when we can look at the facts, it then becomes a problem-solving discussion, no longer a personal discussion about I suck, I can't do things. So I always look at the facts.
That's interesting. I think it's an important conversation because the facts are important, but the self story is really important because the human brain has a bias towards stories. There's so many powerful studies that show we remember stories in such greater detail than an obscure statistic. So we hold on to stories because there's so much emotion attached to it.
Yeah.
But I think that's important. And I know it sounds so simple, like you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. But I think that's important for like getting third party people in.
Yeah.
And I think I definitely resist that. But I've definitely let go of that pressure. But I feel like a lot of people have a fear to ask for help.
And that's a choice though, right? And I think if we come back to the fact that I don't want to ask for help, well, that's a choice. That's okay, you know? And I think we put so much pressure on ourselves on what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what we are doing, what we're not doing. But it's just remembering that we have a choice at every single moment on what decision we make, what decisions we're not making. Even inaction is a choice to not take action. So it's really coming back to actually, I have full control over the results I'm getting or not getting, the things I'm doing or not doing. And oftentimes that is just like, I don't want to ask for help because it's outside the comfort zone. Maybe they might reflect something that is a big gap that we were missing, and it challenges our concept of self as well. So there's so many reasons why as human beings we love to be in that comfort zone because it's predictable. We know what to expect. We know what we're doing. But I would challenge, anyone listening right now, if there's something that you should be doing or that you want to be doing, but you haven't yet, maybe out of fear or out of not sure if it will work out, I would say go for it, because the best story that we can run on is our reality. So while I believe meditations and visualizations and all of these tools are really, really powerful, because our brain obviously doesn't know the difference again between a visualization and reality, what if you were just witnessing yourself in reality, taking those steps, making those moves, taking those actions, that then it was building up all the evidence for, cool, I'm a badass, I'm taking action, I'm getting out of my comfort zone. That then logs it away into your concept of self and says, okay, I'm serious business owner, I'm making these moves, and it builds the deepest self-trust and self-belief that it is going to work out because I'm actually watching myself doing the thing.
I think developing trust and confidence to your word is the most important thing on that self-development journey. But a lot of people sabotage their success. Why do you believe self-sabotage doesn't exist?
Yeah. So I say self-sabotage is basically bullshit. And I know technically it does, I know, but the reason why I don't believe in it is because when we put that label on ourselves, I'm self-sabotaging, my mind is sabotaging me, it has this negative connotation, but our brain is not here to sabotage us. It's literally, I call it like an overbearing mum. It's like running on the stories we tell it. So if you tell it that Johnny was mean to you at school, she's going to be like, maybe you shouldn't hang out with Johnny today. So our subconscious is basically that overbearing mum that says, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that thing so that we can keep you safe. And so when we start to show ourselves more kindness and love from that aspect, I actually always tell my mind, thank you so much, subconscious, for alerting me to the danger, but I'm choosing to be safe. I know what I'm doing and I'm going to do it anyway, versus trying to just push harder and not sabotage. It's actually just acknowledging the role that our mind is playing.
Yeah, I like that, because I feel like with self-sabotage, we hold on to stories that aren't true very easily, and they have a big hold on our lives. So even if self-sabotage technically exists, why don't we hold on to beliefs that actually serve us? Because we hold on to stories from other people, these negative beliefs that hold us back, these limiting beliefs. So why not believe in something that actually serves us?
Yeah.
Because what did I write about the other day? I was saying to do with perfectionism, and I believe perfectionism, this is a lesson I learned the other day. I'm interested to hear your perspective. It says perfectionism is an illusion that we create for those who don't have the courage to be wrong. Basically, I believe it's deflecting responsibility, isn't it? The same thing with self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like, this isn't me. It's something that I have no control over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think removing responsibility takes away agency, but I think it takes self-awareness to recognize that. But it's the same with self-sabotage and perfectionism. It's not me. And I think people, in the process of not wanting to feel the discomfort of owning their shit, they lose the power to change their lives.
Yeah. We want to avoid pain more than we want to gain pleasure in everything. Like back in caveman days, our brain's pure function was to keep us alive, was to alert us to threats. And so it's like we're hardwired to focus more on the negative things, to focus more on the threats, to focus on the things that might kill us, which in this day and age, like having a hater online, our mind doesn't know the difference between that threat and like literally the threat of death. And so, of course, our mind is going to be hardwired to focus more on the challenges, on the threats, on the limiting beliefs, on the things that are not all that positive and great. And so it really takes conscious awareness to start to focus more on the positive stuff. And something that I do with my clients every single Friday, they fight me for it every single week, but I'm like, what are your wins? What are you proud of this week? And it is hard if you haven't done it before, or you're not wired into that being like at the front of your awareness. It's hard to find. I, as their mentor, can see it because I'm like, I know what you've been doing. I've been watching what you've been playing out, and it's freaking epic, but most people can't see it. And so we actually need to start to bring that to conscious awareness so that then our mind can just start pulling in all the evidence throughout our week, throughout our day on what we have been doing and all the epic stuff. And the more we do that, the more we build our delusional self-belief of, I can do some pretty cool stuff because look at all the evidence. I've journaled on it. I can see it. I'm aware of it. But unless we're aware of it, we're just going to be continuing to build up all the evidence of where shit is hard.
I wrote this thing the other day, and I feel like it speaks to humans. We're a walking paradox, but I think we're too hard on ourselves when we take such positive action. We're always looking to what we didn't do.
Yeah.
But I also believe we're not hard enough on ourselves to get out of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
So it's like we're hard on ourselves for the things where we don't need to be hard on ourselves, but we're not hard enough on ourselves to actually take true positive action. And I think it comes from that place of fear of like who we think we have to be. We're hard on ourselves for not having enough followers or not having this level of success that we've created, but I don't think we're hard enough on ourselves to have the hard conversations and start changing our lives. And yet, for some reason, we create this wholesale answer like, oh, we need to be kinder to ourselves. So then sometimes we excuse ourselves from the responsibility to change our life. But I don't think it's so black and white.
Yeah, it's kind of like this cause and effect, the chicken and the egg, which one came first? Because if we're hard on ourselves, like I'm not capable of that, then it allows us to not take action, because if we're not capable, then why would we take action? And then it keeps us in that comfort zone. And then because we're not getting out of the comfort zone and taking action, then we have even more evidence that we're not capable of it. And so it's like this never-ending cycle that really the negative self-talk keeps us from taking action usually, because it's a pretty good excuse. I often find that people who have a big fear of getting out of that comfort zone tend to have not much energy, or, you know, start to get sick a lot. And it's like these physical symptoms showing up, because if you're sick, you can't take action, you need a rest, which is fair. But it's happening and manifesting in a physical form so that you have a reason to not take action. And so it's almost this never-ending cycle of, why are you afraid to take action? Why do you not have as much energy? And sometimes in those moments, if you find yourself in that cycle, not everyone's in that, because some people get out of it and start to build their confidence. But if you find yourself in that cycle, the number one thing we need to do is like, even if I'm sick or even if I don't feel like it, I need to take action. And usually by taking action, we show ourselves it wasn't as hard. I didn't die. Like, I'm okay. And when we do that for the first time, we're like, oh shit, that was pretty cool. And then next time it gets easier and easier and easier. And before we know it, like, we have more energy than ever. And our bodies and our whole system helps us to continue to get out of that comfort zone. I actually get such a thrill from doing crazy shit now that I'm like, I feel uncomfortable when I'm not uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Like, my comfort zone is feeling uncomfortable because I've done it so many times that if I'm not feeling that push or that growth, I'm like, something feels off. It feels not like me.
How do you balance that? I've had this conversation a lot. It's like, how do you balance wanting more but not getting stuck in that anxiety addiction of like the growth of you?
Yeah, so back when I had my 5 businesses, I realized that I was chasing that because I was worried that someone else would beat me to it. It was highly fueled by fear, anxiety. I've got to do things faster because someone else will take it. And that's a very like limited lack mindset. Whereas if we're looking at a growth mindset where we're like, cool, I'm so grateful, I'm so grounded, I'm pretty damn proud of myself on what I've achieved, but also I'm allowed to want more. And actually last year, I went to Europe. I was like 2 months in Europe, traveling around, luxe vacation, like making money in my business. It was flowing in while I was having a holiday, and not one of those kind of holidays where you're on your laptop the whole time either. And I was like, this is freaking epic. Like, this is the pinnacle of success that I'd set out to achieve. And after 2 months, I detached from my business. I was like, cool, I want to gain some new perspectives, bird's eye view. I came back from my holiday, and throughout that process, I kind of convinced myself that what I had was enough, that I shouldn't want more because I should just be happy with what I have. But because one of my biggest values is growth, what I was also doing was denying the part of me that loves growth, that loves a challenge. I was like, you're not allowed to want more because you already have enough, Jess. And so it was that recognition that I then could switch into, okay, you know what? I'm so grateful for this, but I'm also allowed to want more. And it's actually a balance, because you won't always be in the state of I need more, and you won't always be in the state of gratitude either. But it's finding that when you feel like you're pushing a little bit too hard or saying I need more, then I'll feel fulfilled, it's actually then looking back and saying, okay, what am I grateful for that I've already done? Or if you're sitting in that zone where you're like, I'm so grateful, I'm not allowed to want more, I'm doing good, and you're like, oh, but something feels off, then I just ask myself, like, what do I want to achieve? So I think it's just this balancing act back and forth where you're not always going to be 50-50 in both. It's sometimes you're going to be in mass growth zone and pushing a little bit harder. Sometimes you're going to be in grounded state and enjoying what you've created.
Fear is the most potent fuel. How do we transcend that? Because the negative stuff drives us, right? It's the fear of not wanting a mundane life, the fear of going to a 9-to-5 job. That's part of the fuel. But I'm trying to understand in people's stories, because I think it's something you went through and we're speaking of, is like finding that place of love, because one of your values is growth, but it's not that you're running away from the fear of the 9-to-5, because that's the story you could tell yourself, but you don't want to deny that value you have to attain as much as you can.
Yeah. For me, my biggest fear now is not living up to my potential. And for a long time, my fears were around someone beating me to it, or fear of being judged, or fear of being seen. But honestly, where I'm at now, my biggest fear is not going back to a 9 to 5. Like, that's not even on my radar. It's like not even happening. Like,
Too far gone now.
Never in my wildest dreams. I'm like, I'll start another business if this one doesn't go well. But my biggest fear now is not living up to my biggest potential and like playing smaller than what I know I'm capable of. And so, yeah, I think it is just about finding what your driving force is, because some people's fear is I might lose my house and I might have no money and like, you know, basic human needs kind of stuff. Whereas other people might be like, my biggest fear is not living out my potential. And I don't know if you've heard of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so we've got like basic human needs at the bottom, and then we've got, you know, self-esteem and belonging. And then at the top, it's like self-actualization. So if you're listening, Google an image of it. But I think for people, they could identify like where they're maybe at on that pyramid and identifying their fears that might be playing out in that realm and using that as your ammunition. Because if I think about now not living to my fullest potential, not doing the stuff that I really want to do, and I'm on my deathbed and it's like, oh, I had these dreams that I never took action on. That's my worst nightmare. And that drives me. But it's not something that's front of mind that I'm focusing on all the time.
I feel like in our society, you hear a lot of these people who attain that financial success, and then it's almost like, oh, poor you have these rich people problems. But from when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think it becomes clear that they've sort of transcended those financial needs, those lower base needs, and they're trying to attain this purpose. I think Jim Carrey had this quote like, I wish everyone could become rich and famous to realize that it isn't what it's hyped up to be.
Yeah.
So I think, and those are the people that have the most access to everyone. So I think, do you think that's a powerful driver to find that financial freedom first? Because I think a lot of people can't actually figure out who they are, figure out this purpose. And I guess I feel like for your journey, like you chased this, you know, society's versions of success early on, but then you reached that, you had the financial freedom, and then there's this other sort of like existential longing for more.
Yeah.
So it's almost like until you get rid of the things that prevent you from going higher on that Maslow's hierarchy, you can't actually figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. Like, if you're homeless, you're probably not thinking about what's my purpose in life. You're probably like, I need to get some money to eat, right? And so for me, the way that I did that was I was in my full-time job for well over a year while I was juggling the business. I wasn't looking after my health at all, which I don't recommend, because that is also a need that we need to have met so that we could create safety in that level for more success. But I was living at home at the time. I was in my full-time job that was funding the business so that I wasn't, you know, left high and dry in that sense. And so you can always look at, and that's why I say to people, it's not always the right answer to be like, cool, I've got a big dream, I'm going to quit my job today and go all in on it. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not, because if we put ourselves in such a state of, you know, unrest that all we can think about is scarcity, I don't even have money to pay for food or for rent and things like that, then it's going to be very difficult to get to that next level of success, because what your mind starts to do is creates a narrative around, starting this business means that I don't eat, means that I don't have any money, means that I can't pay my bills, means that I'm going to be homeless. And it actually starts to create this narrative that then self-sabotage comes in and it says, let's eliminate the threat. Let's eliminate this business so that we can have those basic human needs met again. Let's go get a job. So I think being aware of those is going to be really powerful to staying on track.
I definitely feel like I must be a bit lower on the Maslow's hierarchy, because I don't feel the pressure to I want to reach my potential, but that's because I believe that I still have to find, you know, financial freedom. I still have to attain so many of these goals that I've set out to do, because I feel like once I do that, maybe it will come to me, or maybe I'm different. I don't really have the answers, and I feel like that's where time.
I think it's a journey. As much as we can look to these models for like explaining the concepts, it's a journey. Because even last year, I found myself, sure, I was at the top of the pyramid where I was like, cool, what's my purpose? What's my next level? How can I have more great stuff? But I was missing a community. Like, I felt lonely as hell. Like, I have my partner, we both get to work from home and it's awesome, and I get to travel and do all this. But I didn't really have people who I felt like were on the same wavelength with me. And so I was missing that part. So then I went out and I made it an intentional effort to have more connection. So I think it's just like this never-ending journey with everything of next level beliefs, next level ceilings, next level self-sabotage, next level needs, next level things. And it won't always be in equilibrium, but it's knowing maybe what season we're in. And sometimes that's hustle season. Sometimes it's finance season. Sometimes it's joy, freedom, and going to Europe for 2 months and completely disconnecting and making it okay that that's the season we're in.
Now that you have all these lessons and I guess wisdom from everything you've done, what's your mindset with like keeping an open mind to not having it figured out? Because I feel like you can have strong conviction, but also keep open-minded. I wrote about this the other day because I feel like a lot of people who have the awareness that they don't have it figured out, this was me, you stop speaking because you're like, well, I clearly, I'm going to be embarrassed when I get proven wrong.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you don't do that, you go nowhere because you stop taking action.
Yeah.
So like having strong convictions, but keeping open-minded is a powerful mindset, but one that's hard to attain.
Yeah, I mean, I ultimately believe there's no true or false in anything. In every scenario, there's going to be some people who can argue all damn day about this side and people who very much are convicted on the complete opposite. I think the key with whether it's putting your opinions out there, sharing your wisdom, sharing your journey, what's right for you, is knowing your truth. And it's like, if someone wants to say I'm wrong, that's okay. And I'll keep an open mind, be open to new ways of doing things, but that's my truth. And it's being okay with that. I had a client just this week. She was going out and creating a course on AI, and that's helped her scale her business. She was like, I want to share this wisdom with other people. And then she saw a post by a major leader in the USA who said, AI will not help you grow your business. And she came to me and she was like, Jess, I need to burn my whole business down. I can't do AI. No one's doing AI anymore. And I was like, who said that? Who said it's not right? And so when we can ground back into our truth, that maybe that was part of her journey and she wants to share that knowledge, it's one tiny piece. And the right people will be on board with it and the wrong people won't. And that's okay.
All right, to finish up.
Yeah.
We'll do this little card. So I'll pass you 3 cards.
All right.
And got to pick one. If you're not happy with any of those, I'll give you some more.
Okay.
You happy with those, or you just have to answer one of them? So
Yeah. Yep. All
okay.
right.
You want me to go first? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got, when I look in the mirror, the first thing I see. I think that's interesting because I feel like when I look in the mirror over time, the first thing that comes to mind has changed so much. So the first thing that really comes to mind with me is just like, I'm proud of myself for just having a go.
Yeah.
And like, I have such an understanding that I don't have all the answers, but I have this deep belief that I'm just proud for my willingness to keep trying and keep being consistent.
That's awesome. Okay. I owe an apology too. And I want to say to my younger self for kind of neglecting myself on the journey, allowing myself to hit burnout twice and sort of putting my needs aside to the business. Yeah.
Is it possible to reach the success you've had now without doing that?
Yes, it is. And I truly believe there are going to be periods, yes, you do need to work hard, but you do not have to hustle and burn out. And that's something I truly believe. I did it out of scarcity and I I actually believe I could run 5 businesses with ease now, without stress, without burnout, without all of that. It was more about the mental state and the narratives that I was operating on.
Jess Williamson, thanks for coming on. I know we're pressed for time, but I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your wisdom. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.